Imagine a future where your doctor could say, all right, I know exactly the best way to treat this condition based on your own genes
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
That's the promise of personalized medicine, and we're going to explore how AI is making that future a reality.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah, today's deep dive focuses on a review of 29 research papers, all exploring the use of generative AI in healthcare,
Wow.
and specifically how it's impacting personalized medicine. So are you ready to dive in?
Absolutely. I think this collection of research gives a really fantastic overview of just, the current state of the art, and this field is evolving so rapidly.
Yeah, 2019 to 2023.
Yeah.
All these papers were published between then.
Really cutting edge.
Yeah, super cutting edge. Let's jump right in. One thing that really caught my eye was this concept of AI actually creating synthetic patient data. Can you tell us more about that? Like, why is that important?
Yeah. So, one of the biggest hurdles in medical research has always been, the lack of data, or, trying to protect patient privacy. Generative AI, it kind of solves both of those problems because
Wow.
it can create data that mimics real patient data.
Oh, wow.
So researchers can conduct studies and test hypotheses, but without, compromising anyone's sensitive information.
That's amazing. So instead of having limited data or data that could be biased, they can use this synthetic data, which is basically just as good, but doesn't have the same privacy risks.
Exactly.
So it's like having, a whole virtual patient population at your fingertips.
Yeah, it really opens up, a lot of doors for research.
That's incredible. This review highlighted two main types of models that are really good at creating this synthetic data generative adversarial networks.
Ah, yes, the jams.
The GANs, okay. And then variational autoencoders, or VAEs.
Yes.
Can we break those down a little bit? Those are some complex sounding names.
Yes, so those both fall under the umbrella of deep generative models, and they use deep learning techniques to generate new data.
Okay.
So you have GANs. They are kind of like a competition between two AI systems. You have the generator, it creates the synthetic data, and then you have the discriminator, which tries to spot the fake data from the real. And so this kind of back and forth, it pushes the generator to become incredibly skilled at creating data that's basically indistinguishable from, real patient information.
So it's like an AI arms race.
Exactly. Yeah.
The generator is trying to outsmart the discriminator.
Right.
And by doing that, it becomes this master data forger.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
What about VAEs? How do they work?
So VAEs, they take a slightly different approach. They're more like master data compressors. They learn to represent complex information in a simpler form, and then they use that representation to generate new data.
So if GANs are forgers,
Yeah.
the VAEs are kind of like creating those super compressed zip files on our computers.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Okay.
Yeah, they're, compressing the data down and then re-expanding it to create something very similar.
And that has huge implications,
Yeah.
right? Because now we can do all this research with this synthetic data that we couldn't do before because of data access or privacy.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very, very powerful.
It's amazing. But all of this sounds very high level.
Eh.
How does this actually translate into helping doctors and improving patient care, like in the real world?
Yeah, so one area where this is making a big difference is in dealing with the problem of missing data in electronic health records,
Yeah?
EHRs.
They're famous for being incomplete and messy.
Exactly. And, incomplete records make it difficult for doctors to make accurate diagnoses and treatment decisions.
Huge problem.
Yeah, so AI is kind of stepping in to fill those gaps.
Oh, wow.
One of the studies in this review looks at a model called CGN, so Clinical Conditional Generative Adversarial Network. It's specifically designed to fill in those missing values in EHRs.
Wow.
It's almost like an AI detective, piecing together a puzzle.
So it's not creating new data, it's just making the existing data better.
Yeah, cleaning it up and making it more reliable.
And they found that it was really good at this.
Yes, so they focused on using CGN for diabetic retinopathy detection. And it was not only accurate at filling in the missing information, it actually outperformed other sophisticated imputation methods. So this means that AI could help doctors catch early signs of this eye condition, even when those records are incomplete.
That's a huge win for patients.
Yeah.
So AI is helping to make sense of messy data, leading to faster and more accurate diagnoses. Are there other examples of this in clinical practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Another study used generative AI to create what are called synthetic cohorts
Okay.
for a specific type of cancer called myeloid malignancies.
Okay.
So essentially, they created a whole group of virtual patients with this cancer,
Wow.
which is, incredibly valuable for doing research and developing personalized treatments.
That's incredible. So it's
Yeah.
like having a virtual lab where you can experiment and test different approaches without having to recruit real patients.
Right.
And this could be a game changer for rare diseases where, real patient data is so hard to find.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing.
And the researcher behind this study, El Imam, actually created a web portal where clinicians can generate these synthetic cohorts.
Oh.
So it's making this powerful tool accessible to a wider range of researchers and clinicians.
That's fantastic. And this brings us to another important application, anonymizing sensitive patient information.
Right.
So we talk about how synthetic data protects privacy.
Yes.
But what about real data that needs to be shared for research? How do we protect privacy in those cases?
One of the papers describes a framework called ADS-JAN. It stands for Anonymization Through Data Synthesis Using Generative Adversarial Networks.
Okay, another Jan.
Another JAN. And this framework creates synthetic data that retains the statistical properties of the original data.
Okay.
But it removes any identifying information, so it's like creating a statistical twin
Gotcha.
of the data set that can be shared freely without, compromising anyone's privacy.
That's a win-win.
Exactly.
Yeah. Researchers get the info they need. Patients are protected. Are there other approaches besides JANs in clinical informatics?
Yeah, there are, a lot of different approaches being explored. For example, one study used a type of AI called a Bayesian network to automatically identify patient phenotypes from large data sets of EHRs.
Remind us what phenotypes are again.
So essentially, it's about grouping patients based on shared characteristics like symptoms, medical history, genetic factors, and so on. And this can help doctors understand how different groups of patients might respond to certain treatments.
So more personalized care.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And this particular system was able to accurately predict over 1,500 well-defined phenotypes.
Why?
Which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Shows how AI can really, sift through all that data and find meaningful patterns that we might not see otherwise.
So it's like AI is this super-powered assistant for doctors, helping them analyze data, identify risks, and, personalize treatments with much greater precision.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really exciting.
This is fascinating stuff. But you mentioned earlier that AI is also making waves in medical imaging. I'm eager to hear more about that.
Me too. That's where we really start to see the visual power of AI at work. How it's transforming the way we diagnose and treat diseases through medical images.
Okay, let's dive into that world.
Let's do it.
So we've seen how AI is this amazing data analyst, helping doctors make sense of all this complex information.
Yeah.
But how is it being used in medical imaging? What kind of impact is it having there?
Yeah, medical imaging is a really great example of how AI is not just, crunching numbers. It's actually seeing and interpreting images.
Wow.
In ways that can really impact patient care. And one area where we're seeing some remarkable progress is in pulmonary imaging, specifically for lung cancer detection.
Lung cancer is so hard to catch early.
It is.
And early detection is key.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah. And one of the studies in this review talks about this deep learning model called UHPNet, and it's designed to predict the growth of lung nodules from CT scans.
So it can look at a scan and not just see like, oh, there's a spot there.
Right.
It can actually predict how it's going to change over time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's looking at the images and saying, okay, based on what I'm seeing here, this is how I think this nodule might evolve.
And that gives doctors a much clearer picture.
It does, yeah. It helps them understand, the potential risks and plan for treatment much earlier.
That's incredible. And this predictive power isn't limited to just lung cancer.
No, not at all. Another study used a model called GPGAN, which stands for Growth Prediction Generative Adversarial Network.
Another Jan.
Another Jan. And this one was used to predict brain tumor growth.
Wait, AI predicting how a brain tumor is going to grow? That sounds like science fiction.
I know it does, but it's becoming a reality.
Wow.
And in some cases, this GPGAN model, it actually outperformed traditional methods and even other deep learning models at predicting, the tumor boundaries, which is really important for surgeons when they're planning surgery.
So it's giving them this incredibly detailed roadmap of the tumor.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like having a crystal ball almost.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What other breakthroughs are we seeing in neuroimaging?
Well, beyond tumor prediction, generative AI is also being used to decode individual brain atrophy patterns in Alzheimer's disease and mild cognitive impairment.
Hold on, decode brain atrophy patterns.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
So it's about identifying those subtle changes in brain structure that might be early signs of these neurodegenerative diseases.
Oh, wow.
And these studies developed models called BrainStat TransGAN and GAN-CMLE.
Okay.
And they can pick up on these really subtle clues, which could allow for, much earlier diagnosis and more personalized treatment plans.
So it's not just detecting the presence of these conditions.
Right.
It's actually understanding how they're progressing.
Exactly. And that's crucial for developing effective interventions.
Yeah, absolutely. And this ability to analyze images on a personalized level, it's also revolutionizing ophthalmology.
It is.
One study focused on age-related macular degeneration, or AMD,
Right.
which is a leading cause of vision loss.
Yeah.
They used a model called attention gen to predict how effective different treatments would be for patients with a specific type of AMD called neovascular AMD.
Yes.
So another Jan, attention GAN this time.
Right.
These things are like Swiss Army knives.
They are very versatile.
But what was this attention Jan predicting in terms of AMD treatment?
It was predicting which anti-VEGF treatments would be most successful in reducing fluid buildup in the retina.
Okay.
And interestingly, the AI model actually outperformed human examiners in identifying fluid status after treatment in some cases.
Wow. So AI is a sharper-eyed diagnostician than some doctors.
It can be, yeah, in certain situations.
That's both impressive and a little bit daunting. But, I mean, ultimately, if it leads to better outcomes for patients, that's a win.
Right, absolutely, yeah. It highlights how AI can really augment human expertise and help doctors make more precise treatment decisions.
Okay, so we've seen how AI is changing the game in pulmonary imaging, neuroimaging, and ophthalmology. What about cancer imaging? Any breakthroughs there?
Definitely one study explored the use of AI to analyze the distribution of quantum dots in breast cancer tissue.
Quantum dots.
Yeah, so these are tiny nanoparticles that can be used for imaging and drug delivery.
Wait, nanoparticles? Are we talking about like microscopic robots delivering drugs to tumor cells?
Not quite robots, but the idea is similar. These quantum dots, they act like tiny beacons, allowing doctors to see how a drug is distributed within a tumor.
Oh, wow.
So the researchers developed a model called GANDA, which stands for Generative Adversarial Network for Distribution Analysis.
Okay.
And this model can create images that show exactly how those quantum dots are spread within the tumor.
So it's like a microscopic map of the tumor.
Exactly, yeah, highlighting where the treatment is going and how effectively it's reaching its target.
That's incredible.
It is a level of precision we just didn't have a few years ago.
And by analyzing these images, doctors can fine-tune the treatment.
That's exactly, yeah. They can assess the effectiveness of a particular strategy and make adjustments as needed.
Wow. This is truly remarkable. It feels like AI is giving doctors superpowers, you know?
Yeah.
Allowing them to see and understand diseases in ways that were never before possible.
Right.
We've covered a lot of ground in medical imaging, and I'm already a little bit overwhelmed by all the possibilities.
I know, it's a lot to take in.
But hold on tight, because now we're entering the world of bioinformatics, where AI is not just analyzing images, it's also tackling some of the most complex biological data, like genes and proteins.
That's right.
Are you ready for that deep dive?
Let's do it.
We've seen how AI is transforming medical imaging, you know, giving doctors these almost superhuman vision powers.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But now we're going even deeper into the world of bioinformatics, where AI is dealing with, you know, the complexities of genes and proteins and these massive biological data sets. What kind of impact is AI having in this realm?
Yeah, bioinformatics, it's all about, analyzing this complex biological data, and AI is proving to be just an invaluable tool in this field. And, it's being used to predict how patients might respond to different drugs and even to design entirely new drug candidates. And this is really where the idea of personalized medicine really comes into play.
Yeah, tailoring those treatments to a person's unique genetic makeup. It's fascinating to think we could move away from the one-size-fits-all approach to medicine.
Exactly.
Can you give us some specific examples of how AI is making this happen in bioinformatics?
Yeah, so one study in this review focused on a model called MOICVAE. It stands for Multi-Omics Integrated Collective Variational Autoencoders.
Okay.
It's a mouthful, I know.
Yeah.
But essentially what it does is it integrates genomic and transcriptomic data to predict how sensitive a patient might be to different cancer drugs.
So it's looking at both a patient's DNA and the activity of their genes.
Exactly.
To figure out, which drugs are going to be most effective for that individual.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like having a personalized cheat sheet for cancer treatment.
That's a great way to put it.
And the study showed that MOICVE, it achieved really high accuracy in predicting that drug sensitivity, which is, a big step toward making personalized cancer therapy a reality.
That's huge, but AI isn't just helping us understand responses to existing drugs. It's helping us design completely new ones too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One paper discusses a method called Dragonet.
Dragonet, okay.
And it uses patient gene expression profiles to generate potential drug candidates for specific diseases. So it analyzes which which genes are active in a particular disease.
Okay.
And then uses that information to design new drugs that could target those specific pathways.
So it's like having an AI chemist on hand, constantly, working to develop new treatments based on the latest genetic insights.
That's a great way to think about it.
This is really science fiction becoming reality.
It is.
And this isn't just limited to diseases that we understand well, right?
No, they actually tested Dragonet on a variety of diseases, including some with unknown therapeutic targets.
Wow.
And saw some really promising results.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So we've talked about GANs and VAEs. What about those large language models, the LLMs that we mentioned earlier?
Right.
I'm curious to know more about how those are being used in bioinformatics.
Yeah, so LLMs, they're starting to play a pretty significant role in this field as well.
Okay.
One study explored their use in a process called gene prioritization, which is basically trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Right.
Scientists need to figure out which genes are most likely to be involved in a particular disease or process, and that can be really time-consuming and complex.
Yeah.
So LLMs are being used to kind of sift through all that genetic data and highlight those key genes.
It's like an AI detective helping solve these complex biological puzzles.
That's a great analogy. And the study found that LLMs could analyze these vast data sets and really efficiently identify the key genes, so it frees up scientists to kind of focus on that bigger picture.
So it's a huge time saver.
Exactly.
But LLMs are doing more than just identifying genes.
Right.
They're also being explored for their ability to support clinical decision-making in precision oncology.
That's right.
So how are LLMs being used to actually guide cancer treatment decisions?
So they created these fictional cancer cases and then compared treatment recommendations from human experts to those from, a variety of LLMs. And while the LLMs didn't replace that human expertise, they provided some really valuable complementary insights. So it's almost like having an AI consultant on that oncology team.
Wow. It's amazing to think about AI playing such a crucial role in patient care.
Yeah.
It
is.
Working alongside doctors to help make those really important treatment decisions.
Yeah. It's exciting to see where this is all heading.
As we wrap up our deep dive into generative AI and personalized medicine, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, first, I think it's clear that generative AI is already having, a profound impact on healthcare.
Yeah.
From, creating that synthetic data to, revolutionizing drug discovery. It feels like the possibilities are endless.
Absolutely. But like any powerful technology, there are challenges we need to consider.
Right.
We have to make sure these AI systems are, robust, reliable, and developed responsibly.
Absolutely. And, we need to ensure that the benefits of this AI-driven healthcare are accessible to everyone, no matter, their background or where they live.
That's a really important point. So to our listeners out there, stay curious, stay informed, and engage in these conversations surrounding AI and healthcare. This is a revolution that is going to impact all of our lives, and it's crucial that we shape its development thoughtfully and ethically.
I completely agree.
And if this deep dive has sparked your interest, we encourage you to, check out those research papers we've been talking about.
Yeah, the links will be in the show notes.
Until next time, keep diving deep.